Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with chicken tikka masala. That's right, I want to show you my fast and easy take on this very popular chicken curry dish. And if you're thinking, finally, he's listened to my food wish for Indian food, well, keep wishing. Because apparently this was invented in England. Which is fine, because if it comes from England, you know it's going to be tasty. But regardless, just an incredibly delicious recipe, and no wonder this is one of Britain's national dishes. So in a bowl I have some boneless, skinless chicken thighs. Traditionally this is done with chicken breast, but for my version chicken thighs are going to work better. And we're going to go ahead and drizzle that with vegetable oil, and then add a whole bunch of spices. So we'll start with some salt. We'll also need some freshly ground black pepper, some turmeric, so beautiful, some garam masala, that is an Indian spice blend. We'll also want some cumin and some coriander. I'm also going to toss in some cayenne and some smoked paprika. And then last but not least, a little bit of ground cardamom. And then what we'll do is we'll mix this up until that stuff is all coated thoroughly and evenly. And please do yourselves a favor, mix the spices first, then put it over the chicken, then mix it up. Since I just dumped them all in and then tried to mix, it took me like way too long, and I will never get those 10 minutes of my life back. But anyway, eventually I got it all mixed in there. And at that point, we're ready to brown our chicken in this clarified butter. Okay, in an Indian restaurant, they would call this ghee. But all you need to do is melt some butter or microwave some butter, skim off the foamy white part, because all we're interested in is this pure golden butter fat. And once we have that, we'll put a couple tablespoons in a heavy-duty skillet, set on high heat, and we'll go ahead and we'll brown our chicken thighs. And we're doing this for two reasons. Obviously, we like to brown our meats before we cook them in the sauce, generally. But above and beyond that, we're also toasting those spices on the surface of the chicken, which is just going to make everything taste better, which is why we do it. So we want those thighs nicely browned in that clarified butter. And what we'll do once that's happened is remove those pieces of chicken to a bowl to rest. Just go ahead and set that aside, because once it's cool, we're going to cut those into smaller pieces. And then right in the same pan, right in that same clarified butter, we're going to add one chopped onion. We will lower our heat down to medium-high, and we will saute that for about 5 or 6 minutes, just until the onions start to soften and turn translucent. You know the drill. And obviously we're building up a very delicious fond. All right, it started with that spiced chicken, and now we're adding the goodness of the onion. So like I said, we'll saute those onions until they look like this, at which point we're going to add some tomato paste. Oh, and by the way, if you're wondering what happened to those delicious sauteing sounds, I had to turn on the fan, which sounds terrible. But anyway, we'll add in some tomato paste, and we'll stir that into the onions, and we're going to cook that for about 5 or 6 minutes until that tomato paste kind of caramelizes a little. Okay, initially the moisture in that tomato paste is going to sort of deglaze the bottom, but then relatively quickly it will re-caramelize to the bottom, at which point we're going to add a whole bunch of crushed garlic and freshly grated ginger. And we'll just cook that for about a minute, and then we'll do a little bit of an unusual step. We're going to deglaze the pan, but we're going to use crushed tomatoes. So I'm going to dump in some crushed tomatoes or tomato puree. I think those are pretty much the same thing. And just like if we deglaze with stock or wine, those crushed tomatoes are going to liberate all that amazing goodness from the bottom of the pan. So you can see that our fond has been dissolved. Okay, so stir that around until the bottom of the pan looks kind of clean. And at that point, we're going to pour in our cream. Now I'm going to use coconut milk instead of regular heavy cream. I think it's better for you, easier to digest, and a subtle sweetness from the coconut milk really works with those curry spices, okay? But anyway, we're going to stir in some coconut milk. I'm also going to add a nice big splash of chicken stock or broth. And then what we want to do is bring this to a simmer, adjust the heat to medium-low, and just let it simmer for about 15 minutes. Of course, you want to give it a stir once in a while. We want to let that cook a little bit to let everything kind of meld together. And while we're waiting, this would be the perfect time to go ahead and cut up your now probably cooled chicken. So I'm going to take those thighs and cut them up into what they call bite-sized pieces. Although technically that depends on the size of your mouth. But go ahead and cut those up into 2 or 3 pieces each. And at that point, we're ready for final assembly. So at this point, our sauce has simmered for about 15 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and add some hot red chili flakes, some freshly chopped cilantro, also known as coriander leaves in England. And then we'll go ahead and dump in our cut up chicken along with any accumulated juices. Never discard accumulated juices. And once we've stirred in that chicken and it's heated through, you're pretty much done. Although I do like to simmer this for about 10-15 minutes, which I think is going to make that thigh meat a little more tender and succulent. So I did let mine simmer on medium-low for another 10 or 15 minutes until my sauce looked amazing and the meat was tender. Not fork tender, spoon tender. And of course, you're going to taste for seasoning. It might need a pinch of salt, it might not, but check anyway. And at that point, this procedure is officially done, except you got to find some white rice, which I did. And you'll notice I did a beautiful rice presentation using a ramekin, and I was going to spoon over just a few pieces so I could do a beautiful, elegant-looking plate. But unfortunately, I was hypnotized by the aroma and gorgeous appearance of this mixture, and I just kept spooning and kept spooning until I'd spooned on enough for like 3 people. In hindsight, though, I'm totally fine with my decision. And at that point, we only have 2 things left to do. Garnish that with some lime and some cilantro, and eat. And although my portion size was way too big, at least my cilantro leaf stuck together. Hate when that happens. There we go. But anyway, we're going to garnish with some cilantro and fresh lime. And Bob's your uncle, you're done. I have no idea what that expression means, but I love using it. And I'm not being cheeky. The other thing I love is eating this. It is so incredibly delicious. That moist, perfectly tender chicken, swimming in that gorgeous sauce. Like I said earlier, I really like how that little bit of subtle sweetness in the coconut milk works with these curry spices. Just a beautiful, beautiful combination. So anyway, if you've always wanted to make a curry, but we're kind of afraid, hey, they are a little intimidating, this would be a great recipe to start with. So I really do hope you give it a try. Head over to foodwishes.com for all the ingredient amounts and more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.